So Iowa State lost their third game of the season right ahead of the toughest part of their schedule, and I am very concerned this team is not going to be able to finish the way they started.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, now the #1 sports podcast network. I am your host, Nick Marovets. Thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Be sure to hit subscribe down below so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. As today, we talk about Iowa State's loss to TCU, 55-62. Honestly, an ugly loss. Iowa State's third of the season, now 21-3. And look, 21-3, a great start, but we're going to have to dive into what went wrong in this one. We'll take a look at, are there patterns that could play out for the rest of the season that are concerning in the second segment? And then finally, we'll look ahead to the weekend, because this loss came at, I would have to say, a pretty tough time ahead of Kansas and Houston at home. Yes, but nonetheless, two very, very good teams in the Big 12. So we'll dive into all of that today. But first, today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with a bet on FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Iowa State loses 55-62 to the TCU Horned Frogs, a game that they were favored by just over a touchdown in 7.5 points. And this game really, this was just ugly. There was not a whole lot to be excited about in this one. I'll run through the box score really quickly here. Two players with 12 points in this one, Joshua Jefferson and Tamin Lipsey. Milan added 11 of his own, and he went 3 of 11 from beyond the arc. We'll get into that in a second. Other starters with points, Blake Buchanan with 6, Killian Torrey with 5, and then we had 9 points coming off the bench, 5 from Plata, 4 from Heisey, a couple minutes from Bateman, a couple minutes from Mulder. When I looked at this game, you know, the biggest things that I noticed outside of when we get to the team stats, which I'll address in just a second, were 2 runs that TCU went on right before the half. Iowa State's up 28-19 on the Gamecast, and I've got it pulled up here. It's with about 4 minutes to go, but they completely collapsed that lead and ended up going into the half 30-29, right? So TCU found a way to basically score an extra, 10 points. They went on a 10-3 run. Is that what that would be? 29-30 as opposed to 28-19. That's how I'm seeing it. You can't give up that kind of a run right before the half. You just can't. And I would argue up until that collapse, Iowa State was starting to separate themselves just ever so slightly. They were starting to look like the better team in this one. And then they go on, allow TCU to go on that run, go into the half. It's a 1-point game. And TCU, that was enough for them. That was enough for them to stick around in this one, and actually got up by as much as, I believe, 8 was 41-49 here with 9 minutes left in the second. They stayed in this game throughout the second half. Iowa State went on a run after being down 8 and made it a 5-point game, 50-55 with 2:38 to go. And they had the momentum. I believe it was right. I can't remember if it was a media timeout or a TCU timeout. Coming right out of the timeout, though, Milan made a 3. Wiowa State went on like some 10-0 run. It was awesome. Everything seemed to be in order for the Cyclones. But then TCU was like, oh yeah, we were playing basketball. That's right. Okay, let's just lock in for a second. And they go on a 12-0 run to finish the game. First off, unacceptable, right? So we saw a collapse at the end of the first and a collapse at the end of the second. There are a lot of things that I want to address here as far as just the game as a whole. And to start, I want to look at just the team stats. Iowa State rebounded in this one, 31-36, and actually lost the turnover battle as well, with 17 of their own to TCU's 15. Okay. You just can't lose both of those in the same game. And it does go much deeper than just looking at the statistics. When you go back and watch decisions that were made, very poor decision-making at times. This is going to be a little bit of an unpopular opinion, but I will say this. Joshua Jefferson has his moments with this Iowa State team. And I'm wondering if we'll get into that in the second segment, but how that affects this team long-term. In this game against TCU, right, there were definitely moments where Joshua Jefferson was the best player on the floor, right? I don't know. It depends on who you ask on how many times you would say that was, happening on a 5 of 14 night, 1 of 3 from beyond the arc, 8 rebounds, 9 assists, really close to a triple double, right? But there were also moments where he would have the ball and immediate turnover, okay? Or immediate, just, I don't know if you could say bad decision, but certainly not the best decision. And I'm not pinning this loss on Joshua Jefferson, okay? I am not saying that. But I am saying that there seems to be an element of, as soon as things get a little bit out of hand, remember we used to talk about this team would go into ISO ball. I do think they did that a little bit in this game. But it turned into Joshua Jefferson like, all right, I'm the best player on the floor. I'm going to take this game over. I don't think that that's the best play for this Iowa State team. I'm just going to call it how it is. I do not think you can just go into give it to one guy. He's going to dominate the game. That's not how this team is built, in my opinion. You have great playmakers all over the floor, but that doesn't mean you can just give it to them and they're going to light the whole stratosphere on fire, right? When you look at how this team shot, of course they shot poorly from beyond the arc at 22%, and it was a below average night for Milan, but we've just become accustomed to a 55% shooting clip for Milan. That's just not sustainable, right? As much as we want to think that it is, historically, that's why it was such a big deal. That's why I still have this coin on my desk, because shooting over 50% from 3 on as many attempts as Milan had and as many makes and as many games and all of that was ridiculous. We can't count on that to be an integral part of the plan. You can't just say, to tie it back to the point I just made about Joshua Jefferson, okay, we're down a few points. We're going to give Milan the ball literally every possession. Just keep shooting it. If the ball finds its way to Milan's hands and he's taking those shots consistently, great. But you can't just force feed him the ball and expect TCU to not do anything about it. I don't like the way that the end of this game or half were handled for Iowa State. They looked confused. They looked lost on offense. I tweeted that out. I said the offense needs to be figured out. Okay. Now you hold TCU to 62, and honestly, you hold TCU to 50, right? Other than the last 2.5 minutes. And everybody knows as free throws start to get involved, that point differential kind of balloons up a little bit. So I get the 12-0 run. It was more like 7 or 8 as soon as Iowa State kind of lost the leverage, where it was like if they score, TCU now has the ball, even though it's tied. Like you lose leverage in that situation. Once they lost the leverage, free throws became a thing. And of course, TCU did not shoot great from beyond the line, or from the line, but Iowa State didn't either. I mean, 2 of 8. 2 of 8. Come on. I hate to be that guy, but you can't 2 of 8. I shoot 2 of 8 on a good day, but still can't have that. TCU didn't shoot great, but that point differential was a little bit ballooned up at the end because of those free throws. But still really held TCU to 50 points or so. Maybe you could say 54 in this one, 55, right? Very good defense. TCU didn't play the best game of all time. I would like to say a little bit of that was caused by Iowa State. So I think the defense is there. And this is what I was saying earlier this week, not only on this show, but on the radio. Iowa State, when you look at offensive and defensive efficiency ratings, they're in the top 10. And offensively, I wondered if there would be a little bit of an inflation after those last few games that look at what Kansas State looks like right now, right? You're beating these teams by 30 points, okay? And that's awesome. That looks great. But you wonder, how much is that really worth? If you beat a team by 10 or 15 versus you beat them by 20 or 25 versus you beat them by 30, how much value are you putting into the 10 versus the 25 versus the 30? And I think that the offensive efficiency ratings kind of were ballooned up a little bit. I was okay with the defensive side of things, but I was a little concerned about the offense. And it just, to be completely honest with you, it was exposed in this game. 55 points from the number 5 team in the country. Like, that's just not going to get you very far. And I brought up the Illinois loss on the radio the other day. This team, if this is literally that team. This team, against TCU that we just watched, was that Illinois team. I remember that season it was, can Iowa State score just enough? It wasn't about can they score 80 points, can they outpace their opponent. Everybody knew they were going to have smothering defense. Everybody knew they were going to hold their opponent to 65 or less or whatever it was. But could they score 65? because it doesn't really help you if you hold your opponent to 15 points in the game if you only score 10. We have this conversation all the time, right? So if you hold TCU to 55, really good defensive day. But you really scored 55. And you could argue you scored less than that. So just this TCU game, not good. Not good. And it's easy to say, oh, they're 21-3, but we're going to dive into why this could be a problem for Iowa State coming up, and we'll talk about it right here after this. But first, a word for our friends over at Indeed. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business moving forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed Sponsored Jobs is the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, location. If I were hiring, I wouldn't just want somebody who can help. Right? I don't want somebody with real experience who can jump right in. And that's what I like about Indeed. You can get specific and target exactly what you need. It saves time because you're spending less energy sorting through mismatches. And with sponsored jobs, your posts get seen by candidates who are actually a fit. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The winter games are officially here. And if you're like anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's what following the winter games on FanDuel is all about. It just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. The drama of curling, shout out United States of America. Curling matches that slow and somehow gets intense extremely quickly. Speed skating races decided by inches. Hockey games that feel different right from the opening face-off. I mean, even niche events that become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. All right, Iowa State lost to TCU was ugly. I'm just going to call it how it is. And honestly, it's kind of unacceptable for where this Iowa State team is at and where they're projected to be. And we're going to dive into all that here at Locked On Cyclones. But first, thank you for making Locked On Cyclones your first listen of the day. Thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, go check out our new Everydayer Club. Gives you access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Cyclones, wherever you choose to listen, and an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server. We've got a link on screen. Got a link in the show notes, in the description. If you have pen and paper, it's lockedoncyclones.supercast.com. I appreciate you guys for checking it out, and more importantly, I appreciate you guys for listening. So Iowa State loses TCU, 55-62. And for one, let's just start with why this is so unacceptable, right? Iowa State's 21-3. What are you getting all worked up about? This Iowa State team is having a start to the season, I suppose, or at this point, a season for the ages, right? And I agree. I definitely agree. What a phenomenal start for Iowa State. But through their last, 2, 4, 6, 8-ish games, hasn't quite been what I would expect it to be. What I would, at this point in the season, what I would expect, right? Because before the season, if you had told me Iowa State was 21-3 with losses to Kansas, Cincinnati, and TCU on the road, I think I'd be okay with that, genuinely. And I know that sounds a little hypocritical. I think I would be okay with that, though. I'd say, man, it's a pretty good season so far. However, we are not in the preseason. We are in the middle of the season and honestly approaching the end of the season. We know what this team is capable of, right? We know what this team has done, especially in that first bit of the season, what the Players era looked like. I know they got kind of not great draws, but in the Players era, then against Purdue, right, and the win in the Cyhawk, a couple of big wins in the Big 12 Conference. But 21-3 with this loss to TCU is ugly. The loss to Cincinnati, you're coming off a loss against Kansas. You're on the road in both of those games. Like, it's not good. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's good, but I can let that slide. Okay? You cannot lose this game to TCU in the way that they did, the reasons they lost this game, and that's what's so concerning to me moving forward, right? Was this a look-ahead game for them? It's hard for me to say yes or no to that. You're on the road after just playing Baylor at home, I guess. So maybe there's on the road, but they just beat Kansas State on the road. They beat Oklahoma State on the road. So I don't know if the road environment was if they it's not like they were used to playing the last 4 games at home and they went on the road. So I don't know if I would say that. Was it a look ahead game? You got Kansas and Houston this weekend and Monday. You could argue that, but I think that this team is very much locked in on what is next. Right? What game is next? What's the next segment of practice? Right? I don't think there's maybe some subconscious where you're like, oh man, we got some big games this weekend. You're more focused on that. I don't, honestly, with this team, I don't think that's the case. Okay. I am completely okay with saying that. I think this team is much more focused on the current moment. But that's almost more concerning to me is if this team was so locked in on TCU, how do you let this happen? How do you go into this game and it wasn't as bad as the Kansas loss. It just wasn't. But how do you look almost uninterested? And how do you look so lost on offense? Defense, solid. Not perfect. But you still held TCU to I would say 50 points. I'm okay with saying 50. Kind of things got a little out of hand there. Honestly, you could say 55, but whatever. Either way, 50, 55, still extremely low. Good enough defense. That should be good enough defense. You should be able to score more than 55 points if you are as offensively as efficient as we say you are, right? Through those last 5 games where they went 5-0, 87 against UCF, 84 against Oklahoma State, 97, 95 against Colorado and Kansas State, and then 72 against Baylor. And that Baylor team, we knew what happened in the first game where it was a, 24-25 halftime score, 23-24. 24-25 was what it was. So we knew that Baylor, that game was going to look a little bit like that. You can't put more than 60 points. You can't put more than 55 points on the board. You can't score in the last 2.5 minutes. That's concerning to me long term. The offense has been the area where this team seems to struggle. How well is the team shooting from 3 beyond the 3 without Milan? That's a good question. And what does the offense actually look like? When you watch the games, if Milan's not shooting lights out and they're not getting wide open cuts to the basket, there's ball movement and then there's a 40-foot three-pointer from Joshua Jefferson, or there's hero ball where somebody's just going to choose, all right, this is my turn. Taman, you had the last one. Torre, you had the one before that. Player X, whoever it is. Honestly, Milan doesn't do this too much, but Jefferson maybe. I'm going to decide to score this possession. And sometimes that works. That's almost the worst part. There were a couple possessions where Joshua Jefferson clearly decided, I am taking this game over, and scored because he's a very good basketball player. But that is not a sustainable model, right? And that's my main concern with this team is as you now get into these tough games, very tough part of the schedule. We talked about it 100 times. Kansas and Houston, both at home. BYU on the road. Texas Tech at home. Arizona on the road. Not all their games, but the biggest games. These games aren't going to be 30-point blowouts, okay? You're not going to win this game in the first 10 minutes like I thought they had to against TCU. And what ended up happening in that one, right? I thought Well, it really ended up being, I think it's the run before the half that kept TCU in it. I think if Iowa State held them from doing that game has a different outcome. But against Kansas, against Houston, when it's, let's just say 72-70 with 42 seconds left, you have the ball, you're down. How are you going to go get 2 points? Or are you just going to pray that a three-pointer goes in? Are you going to move around a little bit? It looks like ball movement. It looks like they're swinging it from left to right. It looks like they're cutting. They're not really accomplishing anything. And then all of a sudden we just have under 5 seconds left on the shot clock, throw it up, hope it goes in. If not, we hope we get the rebound and we get a favorable look off of it. That's my concern with this team and I've said this before, when they need a bucket, and need is the important part here, because you need buckets the entire game, right? To score, to win. But when they are down, or when it's like you have to score to push this 2 possessions, or whatever the case is, they have a hard time finding the best way to get that bucket, I think is the best way to put it. Not that they can't score. They didn't against TCU, but it's not that they can't score. They have people who can get buckets. They have, great shooters on the squad, but they also have moments where they just look like they're all looking at each other. Like, are you going to score it? I don't know. Are you going to score it? How are we going to get the ball over there? How are we going to get the ball in the hoop? They look confused, which is, I don't know. Maybe I'm interpreting that wrong, but to me, this team, that's my main concern with, is this a sign moving forward? You can play great defense. And we've seen a lot of Iowa State teams that play great defense. It just wasn't enough because you have to score the points. And when you get into close games and you need to score on this possession, you always say big third down here. You need to score. Do they? Can they? That's my main concern with this team. So are they cooked? No, they're 21-3. It's a tough loss to TCU. It's whatever. Just avoid the skin, right? We'll talk about that in a second. But there are concerns that I have for this Iowa State squad. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. We're going to get into what this weekend looks like now for Iowa State, how important it is, coming up right here after this.
I'm Kalia Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. Dawn Staley and South Carolina remain on top of the SEC standings after handing Tennessee their worst defeat in program history with a final score of 93-40. In the 43-point win, South Carolina shot 69% from the field. Tessa Johnson had a perfect shooting night, scoring 24 points, shooting 4 for 4 from the floor, including 2 threes, and made all 4 of her free throws. And UCLA remains undefeated in Big Ten play, topping Michigan 69-66 as Player of the Year contender Lauren Betts put up a double-double, scoring 16 points, collecting 16 rebounds, and adding 5 assists and 3 blocks. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
Iowa State with 2 massive games upcoming, right? We talked about where they've been. We talked about this last game against TCU, right? Not necessarily, it's where they've been by now, but it's kind of where they are, right? And now we got to look ahead to what is directly coming up. We looked ahead to maybe March, like what are the tendencies of this team? But now we have to look at what is exactly on their doorstep, right? What is right in front of them? And this upcoming weekend, Kansas and Houston are going to be knocking on their front doorstep, knocking on Hilton, saying, hey, we want a shot. Hey, we want to win. We're going to see how that goes. And yes, like I said, let's dive into exactly what we're looking at here with both of these squads and what I'm kind of expecting from Iowa State. Going into this, a huge win against TCU would have been huge, not necessarily from a momentum perspective. I think you can make the argument that this loss will potentially, it's a 50-50 shot on whether or not it causes a win or a loss. Like, do they directly impact each other? No, obviously, 2 totally separate games. The scoreboard gets reset, but there is a momentum factor here. But the win against TCU, I think, was more for, do you get a top 5 matchup against Houston? And I guess if you beat Kansas by 85 points, maybe you keep your top 5 ranking, because let's dive into Kansas first. Kansas right now on a generational run. Obviously, the win over Iowa State started this win streak, so it'd be great if we could end it. Win over number 2 Iowa State by 21 points. Ugly, just ugly. Iowa State's losses this year have not been pretty losses. Then a win over Baylor, Colorado, Kansas State, but then BYU, Texas Tech, then Utah, and then Arizona is what has me more concerned, right? Because Iowa State's 5-game win streak, who are they playing? we just brought it up, but none of those teams are, I would say, national title contenders. They're just not, right? And for Kansas, BYU, I don't think is as good as they, or at least as good as I thought they were going to be. They're a very good squad. I am not putting BYU down at all, but I'm not saying they're national title level. Where's Texas Tech at? Probably right around BYU, but Arizona, I think they were undefeated going into that game. Everyone was literally saying this is Arizona's kind of title to lose at this point. Obviously, a lot of games left, and we understand honestly, you probably should lose before the end of the season. It's probably good for you, but at that point, it was literally like somebody has to beat Arizona for them to lose this title. Like they have to lose, and they haven't done that yet. So phenomenal year for Arizona. That win for Kansas, obviously the last win that they just achieved, that was a huge win, right? Just showed what this team is capable of, and no Darren Peterson in that game. So this Kansas team, not only on an 8 straight win streak right here, but also against quality competition. Obviously not every single game, right? Beat Kansas by 24 points, or Kansas State, by 24 points. But they have beat high-level competition, and they'll be coming up to Hilton for a noon game on Saturday, and I am admittedly quite scared. The way I look at this from a momentum perspective, you got a 50-50 shot both ways. You've got, for Iowa State, either they are coming off of a really tough loss, they're shaken, they're confused, there's another loss on the horizon, there's a skid coming, or they're angry. We've got Hilton angry. We've got the players upset, right? And they come out and there is just no remorse. They beat Kansas in the first half, and the second half is simply a formality. That's a possibility for Iowa State, absolutely. For Kansas, you just beat the number 1 team in the country. That's proof that you are a very, very good basketball squad, or you're capable of beating the top of the top, right? And you did it without arguably, I think, honestly, barely even arguably, your best player, maybe the country's best player, right? So there's definitely an element of confidence coming out of that win over, Arizona. But then at the same time, maybe a level of content, maybe, all right, we did it. We did it. Yeah, we got Iowa State, but man, that was the one we wanted. I think if I had to pick between the multiple different options here, I would say that Iowa State is more likely, and I don't love this, but it's just my personal opinion, more likely to be in the indifferent, right? Like a loss hurts, but of course they're going to be slightly upset about it. They want to get a win. That's the way that this squad feels right now. And this Kansas team, I think, is more riding the high, but not necessarily it's gonna carry them to a win. I think we're pretty much right down the middle on that front. Now, which team is better? They played already, and Kansas smoked them. So the way I'm looking at this game, and we'll probably talk about it more this week, but this is a game that Iowa State has to earn the win. You look at ESPN analytics here, 73% chance Iowa State wins this game. The only reason I would agree with that is Iowa State doesn't lose to Kansas at home. But, I mean, Kansas blew Iowa State's doors off. Let's just call it how it is earlier this season. So they have to earn this win. Now, after the Kansas game, where you could be looking at either 0-2 or 1-1 through your last 2 on a 1-game win streak or a 2-game loss streak, you've got Houston, who's also wanting a chance. And that game, per ESPN analytics, Iowa State only has a 55% chance of winning. Obviously, Houston ranked number 3 right now, has a phenomenal resume and on a relatively decent win streak as well. TCU, Cincinnati, UCF, BYU, Utah. Not a ton of world beaters in there either. I personally think Iowa State has a better shot at beating Houston. But if you lose your last 2, where is that team at, right? And I can't refer to the last time Iowa State lost 2 in a row, because then they went into maybe the easiest 5-game stretch that they could possibly have. So and 6, and they lost to TCU. So I don't think the 2 losses is going to make Iowa State this like Hulk where they're just going to get really upset and come out and dominate Houston. I am petrified of Houston if Iowa State loses to Kansas, personally. They're a good team, man. They're a very good team, which is why I have this tone today. But they have not looked at certain points in the season, and they're going to be tested. This is the beginning of the test. You have to beat Kansas. You have to beat Houston. These are must-win games if you want to keep the seed that you're at, if you want to push for the best seed possible, and if you want to, obviously Big 12 tournament, there's a lot of implications, but also from the perspective of what can this team do like inside the locker room. These are games that you have to win if you want to hold that we're a Final Four team. TCU could just be a blip on the radar. It's a very concerning blip for me because we've seen things like this in the past, and we've seen it even in wins. But it could just be a blip, and you figured it out, and you beat all these top teams, and you move on. And they go to a national title. Who knows? This loss did not take them out of a national title. Like, let's not be crazy here. But it did signal a few things. And this Kansas-Houston is a perfect opportunity for them to bounce back and show this is what we're capable of. They just have to do it. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Let me know what you think is going to happen down below in the comments or at Nick_Mark on Twitter. Thank you so much for watching or listening today. I appreciate it more than you know. That's going to do it for today. Until next time, Cyclone fans, sayonara.